Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Modern Sales Pros event. If you're new here, welcome. We're super excited to dive into this great discussion with our lovely panelists that we have here today. But we'll give folks a couple more minutes to trickle in, and we love to start things off with a little fun little icebreaker. And there's a ton of new shows coming out in the spring, and I'd love to know from our panelists what show you're currently excited for or currently watching. And we'll kick things off with Trey.
Awesome. Thanks, Angelica. Yeah, like I said, it's got to be one and only for me. Ted Lasso, March 15th, final season, doing the rewatch for the 100th time. Believe.
Yes, great show. Yeah, I'm super excited. I need to download Apple TV again to watch it. Tammy, how about you?
Oh, I'm The Voice. I'm a Voice junkie, so I love The Voice, even though it's Blake's last season. And I'm looking forward to the final season of Yellowstone.
Oh yeah,
Oh, I have
Yellowstone's
not
good.
watched Yellowstone. Is that worth watching?
I like it. It takes a little bit to get into the season, but like once you get like the first season down,
Yeah.
you'll like it. And the ending is going to be amazing no matter how it turns out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sarika, how about you?
I didn't used to watch that much TV, but TV has become so good, even better than movies in some ways, right? So I love Ted Lasso. We talked about Succession, Mandalorian. There's a show right now called The Last of Us, which is pretty
Yes.
amazing. I don't know if you guys have watched it. That's it's sort of like keeps me on the edge, and yeah, I'm sure. I think I can't sleep at night the days that I watch that show, but it's great.
You guys
Yeah,
are
I've
they think I'm a little out there. I'm obsessed with You. I don't know if you guys have seen You, but it's definitely it's kind of like on the Dexter level. If anybody's ever watched Dexter in the past, but it's very it's kind of twisted, but I love it.
yeah, that's the one on Netflix with Penn Badgley. I've watched a few of the seasons. I need to catch up, but all of these shows, I definitely have them in rotation. I'm currently watching this book adaptation that I've read in the past, Daisy Joan and the Six. It just came out on Amazon Prime. It's really good, especially if you love the 70s, and it's a really great book. Well, thank you for sharing. That was awesome. Also, the audience who are joining us today, let us know what TV shows you're currently watching and also let us know where you're calling in from. I always love to know where our Modern Sales Pro folks are calling in from. All right, so let's get started. I'm super excited to dive right into the topic, creative SaaS pricing strategies in a downturn market. But before we begin, I'm going to say a few words about the team at Modern Sales Pros. Hello, everyone. My name is Angelica. I'm one of the community event managers at MSP. And for those of you who are not familiar, Modern Sales Pros is the world's largest and highest quality community for those in sales management, sales leadership, sales and revenue operations, and enablement, aka our Modern Sales Pros. Our mission is to create an environment for our members to answer questions they struggle to solve on their own and help them to see around corners they may not know about. We do this through live sessions like the one you're at today. We also have an online robust forum, and we are also back with our quarterly summits, so stay tuned. We're coming to a great summit happening next month. It's a Revenue Excellence Summit. And then we're also back in-person events, so stay tuned. We might come to a city near you. And before we begin, some quick housekeeping notes. Yes, this event is being recorded, so if you have a friend or colleague who couldn't make it, the event is being recorded and will be made available on the MSP previous event page before the end of day, along with the key takeaways and any blog posts or articles mentioned throughout the session. Last, if you have a question for our lovely panelists, please use the Q&A function at the top right-hand corner or use the chat as well if you have a question, and we'll be sure to get them live. And this event wouldn't be made possible without our sponsor, Cashflow. Cashflow is a deal closing platform that automates quote to close with dynamic quotes, complex solutions, based pricing, and interactive self-serve checkout. Close deals up to 4 times faster, making meaningful projections with customer insights, and boost ARR with flexible payment and options and built-in financing. I'm going to drop their link in the chat. Definitely check them out. They're doing awesome things. Now, enough about me. I'm going to pass it off to Sandy, who's going to be moderating our session for today, and I'll be coming back for wrapping closing remarks. So Sandy, take it away.
Thank you, Angelica, and thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here and looking forward to having this discussion today. I'm Sandy Robinson, Vice President of Revenue Operations at Nimbus. We provide digital banking solutions for banks and credit unions to help them modernize their technology. I'm in charge of revenue operations, so everything from pricing, sales enablement, contracts, you name it. So lots of fun today. Next, Sarika, if you want to take it away.
Hi. Thanks, Sandy. Hi, everyone. I'm the co-founder CEO of Cashflow, and we work with software and SaaS companies to help them automate the quotation, closing, and renewals process. And maybe the way to think about it is the legacy solutions or tools in the space were designed for very much like command and control, where the salesperson used to try to control the deal, control the price. And all of this has actually it was sort of catered towards one-time sales. And now this model is breaking, right? And the CRO has emerged. And what we are seeing is companies or our customers saying, hey, we want to align value with what we purchase. And so we actually help to sort of take this modern approach to how sales is closing deals now and then expanding them over time. So excited to be here to meet everybody.
Thank you. Tammy?
Yep. Hi, I'm Tammy Sexton. I'm Chief Revenue Officer at Skyflow. Skyflow makes a data vault as a service. It's the first data vault to protect, govern, and isolate personally identifiable information. So I've been on a couple Modern Sales Pros before with Pete and company, and I really enjoy this format. So nice to be here today.
Thank you. And Trey?
Hey everyone, Trey Miles. I am the VP of Sales at Allstacks. I lead the BDR function through to close one, so BDR, sales, pre-sales, and been with the company about 2 years. And for those of you who have been at a pre-Series A company, that's like 10. So seen a lot of change in the last couple of years, and excited to talk about how we do pricing and things like that.
I bet. Thanks, guys. So just to kind of kick this off, I thought I'd want to talk about pricing and how sales really should be involved in pricing. How do you guys think about that? Is, sales spending a lot of time on pricing, coming from product, just from finance? Who wants to make some comments here on that?
I can go. When I joined Skyflow, our prices, we totally restructured everything. And I think the first 2 months I was on board, it was like the reps used to joke, it's the prices du jour, like soup du jour, only prices du jour, because we kept changing things. And the more we changed things, we did it at Skyflow. I did the pricing with the chief product officer, Amruta. It wasn't really like I owned it or she owned it. We really did it together, and we had a really healthy debate. And it changed literally probably weekly or every other week for about 2 months. Then it changed like every month or two. And now it's been stable for about 3 months. But I think it took that back and forth between product and revenue to kind of figure out, like, dial in some of the individual feature prices and the different choices that we had for customers. So I really like the approach. And right now, if I wanted to change something in pricing, I would just let Amruta know. She's been a great partner. And yeah, I think having it owned by kind of both was the best for Skyflow.
Yeah, I mean, that having that partnership is so important to really work together. And then you pointed out being able to iterate, right? So because things are going to change, things change like literally by the day. So what do you think about that, Trey?
Yeah, I personally love having product, like owning pricing with feedback from sales. It for me, it provides like a foil back to, like, so as a salesperson or as a sales leader, as I'm having conversations and negotiating pricing, I want to be able to say, hey, take feedback back to product, but I don't own the decision, because it gives me almost too much power, right, in the conversation, where I can lead back to product when I need something changed. And it gives me almost that, person behind the curtain to go say, hey, I can't make that decision, but let me go have a conversation with someone. And then the other thing is just creating the structure so that sales teams can also co-create with their clients. So it's like creating the fence of what's the pricing structure, but then also inside of that, having what I like to call levers for the sales team to be creative and co-create and create a side-by-side relationship with our client, as opposed to like a command and conquer confrontational relationship when it comes to negotiations.
Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying about product owning pricing. I like to think of it as product, maybe product owns cost as like the cost side of it, right? So I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I would think product would have more expertise than sales would from that perspective and be able to come up with pricing. I don't know, Sarika, what do you think?
So I definitely think it shifts and changes as your startup matures, right? Early stage versus Series A versus B versus later stage. In an early stage startup, which sort of where I am today, pricing is it's jointly by me as a CEO, but also our sales has sales product, and the third is actually our success team. They give a lot of input of what is the value customers are getting, and that actually informs us of what is the customer valuing, because price in the end is a function of value, right? So that's been interesting for us to actually lean on them as well as a function.
Yeah, I mean, so how do you come up with those pricing techniques while you're trying to tie in value and working together with all the various teams? Especially given the market conditions, and obviously you have goals, right? You said you're a startup, you've got to meet those goals. So what kinds of things are you doing in terms of the pricing techniques?
Right. I think there's the general sort of techniques of pricing of how you want to price your product. Is there a platform fee? Is there a variable component? How do you find value? But there's absolutely on top of that, and I think this sort of ties in what Trey was saying, that you have to actually even understand where we are from a macro situation, or where a customer is from their journey of what they're doing today, right? And as we've seen in the last year, there's been a huge shift that has happened in the market, and I would almost say that, there's almost like a freezing of the market, especially if you're selling into the tech world, which I know that Trey and Tammy are, where there's a lot of uncertainty that's come in because of the Fed rates going up. And so pricing techniques or pricing has definitely seen a lot of pressure, right? So you can come up with your sort of ground rules of pricing, but then you actually have to say, hey, with this macro conditions and with where my customer is, how do I meet them where they are, so that we can actually create structures where we can actually make the sale, they can get value, but we, in the end, are also creating a business for ourselves, right? And I've seen two specific techniques being used, and would love to talk more about them. And one of them, we call it ramped contracts, right? And this can be in the form of discounts, which start off as steeper discounts because there's uncertainty now, but that everybody expects that uncertainty to go away next year. So you sort of like ramp up the customer in a way that they feel okay coming in with this relationship with you. The second one we've seen is what you call usage pricing or tiered pricing, and which is basically saying, hey, customer, come in at this lower value because you're going to get smaller value from us. But as you increase the value that you get from us, we're going to increase the charging or the billing that we do for you. And both of them are very, very great techniques for you to sort of enter and start building a relationship with the customer. Yeah.
Do you suggest like going into the conversation, like you kind of already know the type of customer that may go for one style versus the other, or do you kind of how do you approach that?
Yeah, I think companies choose a lane. So either they're going to go the ramp pricing lane, or they're going to go the tiered and usage pricing lane. But when you enter, I think, this conversation with the customer, if you actually can understand where they are, and they'll tell you, if you ask them, they'll tell you, hey, we have budget constraints and this is how much I can spend. And then you basically say, okay, that's great, but this is where we are and this is what I would like to do. And I think the most important thing as a startup, and I think a lot of people dialing in over here are from the startup land, you always think about what will the renewal be at, right? So you can get in, but what is the exit of this contract? Because what you don't want to do is have a discounted price that goes on for the lifetime of this customer, right?
So what do you guys think about that? I mean, Trey, do you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. A couple of things. One is, I have what I call the pricing conversations. So I coach my team I actually coach this as a part of our sales process. So in our sales process, we have what we call the pricing conversation, and we use a slide we call the levers slide, right? And it's the tools that we've as a company have blessed to say, hey, sales team, here's what we care about. And what's really cool about this, and it's for us, it's ramped, like Sarika was talking about. We use, ramping a contract over time so that it starts at a smaller rate, but it ends at a higher based off of consumption. The second one is, length of contract. The third one is timing, because we need a forecast to the board. And there's some specific ways to handle this. And then the last one's actually referenceability. And with those four things, we can co-create with our clients. And in this climate, everybody's going to want a discount. Like, you can anticipate that conversation is coming at you. And so you can control, hey, where do we discount? How do we discount? If you're proactive about actually saying, hey, if you want the best price from us, here's how you get it. And I personally support being very open and transparent with the sales team around what's the needs of the business right now. There's going to be some quarters where we need to close revenue on time because we're tight. We need longer contracts because of the macro conditions, and this is what the VCs are asking us for. And if there's transparency from an executive level down to the sales team, you can build really these win-win-win contracts where the company wins, the rep wins, and the customer wins. And there's enough energy going into the contract to really accelerate into that renewal, like Sarika was talking about. And you can co-create, and that really differentiates for reps where you're building with your client, not in a combative. You don't ever want to be combative in a negotiation process. You want to be really feel like you're sitting side by side. And if you lead the conversation with these pricing levers, it can create a more constructive discussion as opposed to, well, we want a discount, and then there's asymmetrical communication. It can get really contentious.
It always scares me when we give salespeople, like, here are the discounts that you can offer. And so how do you handle that in your coaching in terms of, guidance on that? Because I know as the end of the month gets closer, they're more apt to giving that discount and things like that. And, how do you handle that from a coaching perspective?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. One is I don't ever lead off with what the discounts are necessarily. It's more of it's a structure. I call it a structure conversation. So it's like, what's the pricing structure we're going to put together? So it's more about what's possible. Like, hey, do you guys like 3-year contracts? You're never going to do a 3-year contract. When are you going to buy? It's not hey, you need to buy it this quarter. It's just, when is it? Sooner's better than later. I'm literally kind of having the conversation with you, but that's how we do it. It's not so much, hey, you get this much discount for this thing. It's what's possible. Let's have a possibility conversation. What are you open to? And then we take that structure back, and that's what we get approved. I also tend to lean on different things depending on the needs of the organization. So as we get into the last bit of the quarter, I may say, hey, we're actually offering, it's almost like in a restaurant where you need to sell stuff or whatever. We'll actually, give higher discounts for a March close if we're needing to close a gap on a revenue number. So it'll adjust. And there's actually a great book called The Speed of Trust by Stephen Covey that I really lean into. I think if you're transparent and open with your salespeople and you've hired sales professionals, they're going to be good people, right? You got to hire good people foundationally. And if you trust them, right? Just be transparent with them about what your business needs, and they'll support it.
Nice. Tammy, I see you ready to chime in here. What are you thinking?
In terms of coaching and the AEs?
All of it. Yeah. It looked like you wanted to chime in with Trey there. And then if you could give us some insights and wisdom on pricing.
Yeah. So we had our sales kickoff last week. And one of the things I noticed is, like, I've got one AE that'll come to me every time with like significant discounts. And I've got one AE that'll come to me and want to double the list price so that they can discount 50% and be at list. And like, we don't want to do that either, because eventually your pricing gets known. And as we look to do things like go into AWS Marketplace, we then need a published price list. And that customer is going to figure out that you doubled the price. But then one of the exercises that we did at our sales kickoff, and I would encourage everybody to do this, is we took 3 deals that closed One that closed for a lot more than anybody would have imagined, one that closed for about, and then one that closed for a lot less. And we like put the scenarios up and they were blinded. So we told the AEs that we're making these scenarios up, and we explained the customer's pain, their, what series they were, what kind of money they had. So it's like, what was their pain? What was their capacity to pay, right? And then were we in a competitive situation? So for all three of these, we had to say, here was the pain. No, we're not competitive because it's unique, and here's their capacity to pay. And we asked everybody in the room to come up with what price would you give this customer? And like literally we had AEs saying, I would charge, the standard vault fee plus this many entities, all the way up to enterprise vault fee plus this many entities. What was alarming about the exercise is the difference in, I had some AEs want to charge 25 grand and some AEs want to charge 250 grand. And it was the same scenario that was presented to them. Like, that's crazy. So like at the end, we revealed like, hey, this is this customer and this is the price we got. And everyone went, ooh. So like, as we look to coach AEs, I think it's really important to do exercises like that and to teach AEs that, even if you give them authority to take 25 or 35 or 40% off of list price, like, you're there to maximize revenue for the company and to get a fair exchange of value with the customer, so that they feel that they win, but also we feel like we won. That's what I was going to say when I chimed in when Trey was speaking.
I love it. No, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's especially, knowing your competition is really important when it comes to that, because I mean, unless you are literally a unicorn and nobody's doing it, it's going to be out there. So if you're all over the place, it's just really not going to benefit you in the long term. So that's, I like that. That exercise is great. I like that.
Yeah. And we have some features with SkyFlow that are unique to our product. So if during the discovery call, the AE discovers that these things are important to the customer, or hopefully the AE is asking questions to the customer that makes the customer determine that these technical requirements are important to them, that's a situation where they need to be able to recognize it and charge more. As opposed to a different situation where we may be in competition. It's a straight up use case. Customer has no use for any of these higher level features, in which case that competitor piece of the 3-pronged scenario, right? Pain, propensity to pay, and then are we in a competitive situation is going to take over, and you're just going to discount, and that's the right time to use a discount.
I like that. And it sounds like you have that all baked into your discovery process. So how does that actually, come out in your, just any words of wisdom around pricing, just in terms of additional techniques, or you kind of covered a little bit about when to use, potentially discounting. So what are the other thoughts you have, Tammy?
So I built out a whole discovery call score sheet that looks at, did the rep do a good job setting the agenda? Did the rep do a good job about finding out how do they do it today? More importantly, what other solutions are you looking at to solve this problem? If you say it like that, like, hey, are you looking at competitors? Like they won't tell you the answer. But if you say, what other solutions are you looking at to solve this problem? That isn't necessarily competitors. That might be do it yourself, for example. So at least, right? And did the rep ask questions like, if for our product, if you say, hey, are you going to expand into Europe anytime soon? That creates a need for something that's unique to us. So hopefully during the discovery call, the rep did a good job of following the questions on the discovery call score sheet, which tells them exactly what they need to ask. So some of our unique competitive differentiators become important to the customer. And most importantly, the customer has determined that they need these things. So it's not them showing up, throwing up, talking about all these features, rather asking questions in the customer. So then when you go through the demo, when you go to the demo or technical deep dive, it's like, hey, you said that these 5 things are important to you. Is that right, Mr. Customer? What's going to be the business impact of this? So like you take the pain slides, and that just sets up when you can. And in the discovery call score sheet, it actually guides the AE as to whether things that are important to the customer can actually drive a premium for the product. So if they follow the process, and some of them do and some of them don't, but we always coach on it, they should recognize when they've got a customer that has some uniqueness to them where they can really drive a fair exchange of value that's higher.
So I've heard Tammy call this the trap setting questions, right? Where you basically set the trap to basically get to the value or the pain of the customer, and then how do you solve it? Because that ultimately impacts the pricing, right?
Yes.
Yeah, one thing I like to highlight, and this goes back to kind of setting up the pain or whatever proof of value that we're going to be doing along the journey, and slides that get created and the assets that get created along that process. Like, if we're really listening and being empathic from a discovery perspective, we're being empathic in terms of the problem we're trying to solve and the proof of value. When it comes to pricing, we've already built that trust. I mentioned trust earlier. If we have trust with the client and we're trusting our sales teams, we move so much faster, and pricing can actually be a real joy and be a really cool. I've had customers be like, wow, that was really pleasant. Like, that was shocking. So these if we can create these like pleasant experiences, you'd be shocked at how that differentiates you from your competitors, right? Just creating a delightful experience, being a trust. I hate this buzzword, but being a trusted advisor, truly, not from like a. I don't think a trusted advisor like I'm the smartest person in the room, but I care about you. Like, I genuinely empathically care about your problem. I'm not asking you questions because I'm trying to poke holes in your world, but I literally just want to know you from a human to human connection. And if we're doing this really well throughout the journey, at the end, it's almost, I like to think of pricing as like anticlimactic. Like, we get to this point and it's like, oh, of course I'm going to pay you that, right? Because it's worth it. And you've built the value. And I had a person 2 weeks ago pushing me on pricing from the first call. He's like, well, why do you price it that way? And I'm like, come on, man. And I said, listen, if this is valuable to you, truly, we'll find a price point that makes sense from the value that we're delivering and the value and what you can do. If it's valuable, we'll make it work. And I go into every negotiation, pricing conversation, whatever we want to talk about, from that position of, if it's valuable, we're going to find the right price point. And I start from that foundation of trust, and I very rarely am wrong at the end of that conversation.
And
Yeah.
the way our
Go ahead.
the way our pricing is set up is like, there's different packages that are higher priced the more features the customer wants to use. But in my opinion, like, when an AE sits down with a customer, customers like choices. So the AE lays out the different functionality, and they say, you know what? Of course, this is our most expensive package, but I think you should actually go with the less expensive one, because you need this stuff, but you don't need it for a year. So it will save you money. And the customer's like, ooh, like, they didn't automatically recommend the highest price package. And that makes them feel like a trusted advisor, to what Trey said, overused word, I agree. But like, customers like choices, and they like to feel like they're in it with you, and they're making choices with you, and you are merely making recommendations based upon the technical requirements that were, of course, a derivative of the trap setting questions that you set to begin with.
What I'm hearing you all say, which is genius and awesome, is it's really about the customer, right? And it's how we engage with the customer. And at the end of the day, I mean, unless you're way off the deep end, out of the ballpark, right, with your competitors, which you should already know, you're going to hit on those differentiators. And a lot of what I'm hearing you all say is really comes down to training. Tammy, it sounds like you have some pretty straightforward processes to follow. And you said something that, as a RevOps leader, is near and dear to my heart. You're like, if they follow the process, which is like the bane of my existence, but making it obviously easy to follow the process. So it's just kind of, as we're talking about competitors, which we've kind of led into here, it sounds like some of the differentiation is around the actual sales process. As a RevOps leader, I do evaluate different relationships and solutions, right, that we use from a internal perspective. So not only do we sell software and I work on pricing, I buy a lot of it, which I'm sure you guys do as well. And something that I've been seeing across the board is just a way in the spread of pricing is between implementation fees versus the access to the platform. And then I'm seeing, just in general, in the last several vendors that I've vetted, the licensing fee coming down a little bit, but then those platform fees a little bit going up, right? And just having access and turning on. So that's just what I'm looking. But like, how do you think you can differentiate? And where do you see those opportunities in addition to the sales process and all the things that you guys have said? But what are you guys thinking along those lines?
I think maybe if I can start, I love process because it enables you to get scale, but process needs to have some flexibility built in. And I think that this is the times that we have seen the need for that flexibility to come in, and you have to understand really thoroughly what your levers are. So I'll give you an example. We used to sign 1-year contracts, and actually with the market sort of freezing up, we've said, you know what, let's do 2-year contracts or 3-year contracts, because that gives us leverage to actually ramp up the pricing that would make sense for us as well as for them, right? And that was a flexibility key that we put in to enable us to meet where the customer is and to actually meet our requirements as well. I don't know if Trey and Tammy have seen this, but we've definitely had to look through and think through our processes today and say, what are the levers that are changing for the next year that we should give our salespeople more flexibility on. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I just like you said, I think the stage of the company changes their needs. Like a pre-Series A needs something different than Series A than Series B. And it's not just the economic conditions, it can also, and by the way, the economic conditions for startups changed drastically last March. We all were a part of that, right? Like everybody went from, grow as fast as you can to burn multiples, right? That shift that occurred almost overnight changed the needs of businesses in 22, and I think completely appropriate to, like I talked about earlier, transparency, to go back to your sales team and say, hey y'all, we need to go from a grow no matter what, customer acquisition no matter what, to more long-term contracts like Sarika was talking about, and being able to be flexible with your team and not be so rigid in terms of, hey, this is the way it is, but it's like, what are you all hearing in the market, what's happening at the rep level, and then also what's happening in the macro level, not just for your customers, but also for the company, because we are trying to create contracts that add value to the rep, to the company, and to the customer. One thing I haven't mentioned that I do think is really important is that the rep matters in this. It's very important to make sure your rep's comp plan is aligned to the needs of the organization. I've seen organizations say, hey, we're going to go to 3-year contracts, but they don't pay reps on 3-year contracts. So it's like, make sure that whatever those needs are that we're representing, the rep doesn't get forgotten about. It can feel like that their needs don't matter. And that's, especially in today's market, can create a lot of churn. So that's just one thing I did want to point out, that it's like, it's not just it's the macro, it's the customer, it's the company, and then it's also the rep, and what, driving win-wins so that we can grow together.
Those damn AEs are so coin operated, aren't they, Trey? It's crazy how that works.
Yeah,
it's just a little financial incentive in there for them. Boom, you got 3-year contracts coming out here.
Yeah, it's weird. Yeah, it's strange how that works.
How do you handle that, like incentivize for a multi-year contract? I mean, just maybe some ideas, and you don't necessarily have to give specifics, but what are some thoughts there, Trey?
Yeah, so a couple things. I always like to think through rep compensation around what's it worth to the company. So I always take the company's perspective, and we work with my CEO, right? And we come together and say, hey, what are the levers that we care about based off what we're hearing in the VC? For us, it's in VC conversations, because we're a Series A startup, and so what does he need in those conversations, and then we game out how valuable is a 3-year contract. So there's a big difference between 3-year, and from a compensation perspective, there's a big difference in 3-year paid up front versus 3-year paid annually. So these different contractual levers matter a lot in terms of how you pay. What I typically, this is just, I'm going to give what I do, but I don't, everybody, your business is your business, your needs are your needs. This is not a universal rule. So caveat that. I'm also not a lawyer. I don't know if maybe I should say that.
Disclosure.
Is there a disclaimer button anywhere
here? Disclaimer about who, I'm just a person. What we do is we pay, what I like to think about is usually like a 70%. So if you get 100% for ARR, years 2 and year 3 paid up front would be like a 70% rate. But there is some value given to the rep based off them getting cash up front. Paid annually is a much lower rate. So we drop that down to like 25%, because we can handle it in the cash received from a cash flow perspective. So there's just different models, but everybody's business is different. If you just rate a $700 million Series C, which I don't think those are going out. I know they've never been that big, but I'm kidding. But if you've just raised a huge Series C and you've got a lot of cash, maybe you pay for the whole thing. You pay because you've got your cash rich. So it just depends on where your business is and what what matters and how much you want to pay for that type of behavior. Back to Tammy's point, the incentive, the coin operatedness of the situation.
Yeah. So what we did this year, one of the things that really, it doesn't bother me, I guess, but like the average tenure for an AE selling in the enterprise software SaaS space is like 1.6 years. To me, that's like they barely come off ramp and they're looking for another job. So I was looking for a way to keep people, give them more longevity with the company. So what we did is like, if you do a 2-year deal and say the first year is 100K and the second year is 200K, what we wrote in the comp plan this year, and I don't know if this is going to work, is you get paid on 100K because that's what the company sees. But if you are here on the anniversary of that contract, where the company's monthly recurring revenue goes from 100K to 200K divided by 12, then I will pay you on that additionally up to 20% of your next year's quota. And you get the burden of keeping track of all that shit. So like, I'm going to burden you, not my rev ops.
Yeah.
And it maxes out at 20%. But the goal is for senior people to like people, AEs, like they're always like the grass is greener on the other side. Like, oh, someone's promising me this, or this sale is cooler, or these deals are bigger. So the goal was like to keep butts in seats. For me, I didn't do it past 2 years because with Skyflow, our product is really sticky. So like if we get the first deal, like they'll renew. And I frankly think that, the deals that we're giving away right now are going to be significantly different in 3 or 4 years. So like, I'm trying to stay away from 3, 4, 5-year deals because I think we're significantly underpriced right now. So I don't want pricing for me for 3 and 4 years is like, we're ripping ourselves off because we then have to commit to that price when I think it actually could be significantly higher.
Yeah.
I love that idea of having the AE on the anniversary have kind of an incentive to hang around, because I think a lot of hunter type of roles are, they've got the one, and they might get an opportunity to upsell it depending on the model or when an account manager comes in. So I love that. I love that.
I also love this fact that Tammy's saying you have to really ask yourself how sticky your product is. Right. So if it is a sticky product, you actually, honestly, in normal times, you don't want to do really long contracts because you can go back and talk to them. But you can also do these hybrid sort of contracts where you are locking them in as a customer, but then you create some variability so that they grow. Right. So it is, they might sign up for 100, 200, but there's a variable component on top. So it actually might become 400 year 2. Right. And that is totally possible when you have a solution like Skyflow, because it's so sticky and so sort of core to a company, right? And very usage driven, actually. Yeah.
And cash flow too, because we use it, and I would hate to lose all that data. I guess you can't. Some products you can't get away from once you start using them. And like, I think it's really important when you're doing things like incentives to AEs that you recognize how sticky your product is.
I learned that the hard way, getting off of a certain product, and had an SOW to get the data that I needed to keep to exit the agreement. So that was a surprise, but nothing I could prevent at that point in time.
They said you can have your data back. They didn't say it was without a price. Hey,
I know. And there's nothing that said they couldn't do that. So they did it. So anyway, shifting gears a little bit, so when we talk about, upselling, retaining, generating referrals and things like that, how are you guys setting this up when you are, thinking about your pricing and thinking about those additional sales, cross sales, bringing people in and getting to that renewal, ahead of time? So how are you guys thinking about that as you guys bring in these new customers?
Yeah.
Who wants to start?
Who wants to start?
Go ahead, Sarika, if you want to go.
Yeah. So, I'm in an interesting situation because I get to talk to like at least 10 CROs a week. And so I'm seeing a huge shift and a huge focus on add-ons, expansions, renewals from probably like 2 years ago, right? Or a year ago. And so, I mean, and it really starts with, to me, this role that we have of the CRO or chief revenue officer, and actually the other side of this is the chief is a revenue operations person, which is sort of what you do, Sandy. But we have shifted from saying it's a one-time sale to actually it's a life cycle of that customer. And so every sales leader or every revenue leader is coming in and saying, let's not try to only maximize the first starting point, but let's figure out how can we grow and expand this customer base. Excuse me. So we actually have a customer today. They have 200 plus customers, and they're saying, instead of trying to get net new customers, which is becoming slightly difficult right now, let's actually look at our 200 plus customers and see if we're leaving money on the table with them. And so this particular customer, they actually have, the customer signs up, and they have in the contract some language around overages, but they've never ever charged for that overage. And what happens is, at the time of renewal, they have that conversation about, hey, you went over and used our product so much more. Now you need to renew it at a certain time. So what we're talking to them about is, can we actually increase the frequency with which we have this conversation with the customer and give them transparency into their usage? So what if every quarter your CS person could talk to the customer or your salesperson and say, hey, we see you trending towards an increased usage. Would you like to extend your contract today? And then actually send them an add-on and give them some discount on it versus them getting surprised. In fact, we have customers who are coming to us and saying, we want to show you the usage. We want our customers to see their usage on a daily basis, so they can actually see how much value they're getting, and we can actually have easier conversations around charging them value for it. So I feel this whole model of one-time sale, which went to 3-year contracts or 1-year contracts, is sort of like splitting into, quarterly conversation and probably over time monthly conversations, but at least quarterly for now, right? I'm very curious to hear if Trey and Tammy have seen this or have experienced it, but it's sort of like amazing. There's a whole new conversation around renewals and auto renewals, which we should talk about as well, right? Yeah.
I just slacked one of my reps that he needs to remember to check on one of our customers' usage. As Sarika was talking about, I was like, "Oh yeah, we need to make sure we do that."
Trey, how do you do this today? Yeah, I'm curious.
Yeah, we sell a really interesting product when it comes to usage because it's a data platform. So, and I'm not going to talk too much about what we do, but it's almost like, you're never going to sell a CRM to a part of your sales team. You need to sell it to all of your salespeople. We have a very similar problem where it's like, if I have a CIO or a VP of engineering, I need to get them access to enough data to cover their entire organization, but that can become cost prohibitive for the initial sale. So what we do a lot of times is we'll create a ramped contract over the course of the contract, whether 1, 2, 3 years. And what we're doing in that is we're creating that lower barrier of entry to get them into the product and using it and seeing the true value and power of it, while at the same time maintaining. It's always with an eye towards how do we maintain future value, both for us as a company, but also for the customer. So that's just a very tactical strategy that we use to both get them into the tool, get them the right visibility they need, and then also maintain value for the company. And then we also do, we have some similar things. We do quarterly, we're supposed to do quarterly reviews of usage. Some of that's written into contracts, although I had to slack one of my team members just to remind them of that. Back to Sarika's point, that can be challenging when it comes to managing when you have those conversations, remembering to have those conversations. Even one of the levers we have is market activities, like recording videos. Like, we have people who've signed up to record videos that we've never recorded videos for. So, operationalizing some of these levers that I was talking about earlier can be a real problem and can be a real challenge, and we still struggle with it. So the struggle is real, and thus, Sandy's the RevOps role being so important.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, it really comes down to the full customer buying journey. So, what Sarika, what you were saying kind of resonates just in terms of showing them that value, right? And thinking of it as not just the AE, because I think what happens is from when somebody's a lead, it's like, oh, marketing like throws it over to the AE. The AE, does the thing. And I realize you guys are in kind of some of these smaller organizations. But it really needs to feel like it is one experience. And by kind of doing that and engaging with them and showing them, if you have the data, so there is a challenge, right? So some companies, and we struggle with some of that, is accessing the data from, especially if they're really complex systems and things like that. But if you do have the ability to really show them what they're doing and how they're using it and getting value, I think that's huge. Like, that's really huge. And you got to get those reminders automated, Trey. So what are you thinking there, Tammy, around all of this?
So we have a customer experience, director of customer experience, and that team at Skyflow is like amazing. But I do make sure to encourage our AEs. You are account managers. You are not opportunity managers. So you don't take what marketing gives you, sell them something, and then throw it over the wall to Ari's team and say, have fun with that. So they are encouraged and actually required to stay involved. The quarterly business reviews, in as much as they are scheduled by the customer experience team, we always have a meeting so that we can talk about, additional sales opportunities, where they are. We've got a base component and a variable component to our pricing as well. So pulling that, query before the customer, the quarterly business review, as to where they're at in reference to the capacity that they bought, is really important. And even like when a deal closes, you encourage the account manager to make sure that they've got a meeting set up in the future with the economic buyer, because a lot of times, depending upon the size of the organization, we're not getting EBs sitting in on quarterly business reviews. They buy it, they sign the PO, and then they say, hey, you go take, you own this tool now. Congratulations. So to continue that meeting with the economic buyer and to continue that feeling from the customer that the AE is like this, like they're my trusted, partner in this opportunity, and this, my liaison between me and XYZ company is really important.
And I actually like what you said, Tammy, is, if you sort of build your pricing model where you're selling the customer only what they need, but then you have all these add-ons, which they could just start using over time. When you have that quarterly conversation, you can say, hey, customer, you started using this. Is it giving you value? And that becomes an opening to do expansions mid-contract, which absolutely is amazing to do, because, that's the cheapest way probably to expand your revenue, right?
Yep. And our three different pricing, the three different vaults. Right now, we don't have a license manager that says, oh, you can't use that. So when they go to use something, it's not turned off. So we have to, one thing I always make sure reps understand the customer is that, we're not going to be Oracle and say, oh, you're using this, now you owe me 150 grand, because customers hate that. But just make sure that you're working with your economic buyer as you're walking through hey, I'm going to recommend this middle-sized one, that the customer understands, like the functionality in the enterprise version is not cut off, but we'll let you know if you're using it. And if it's driving value for you, great. And if it's not, then we'll work with you to make sure that that's not something that you use moving forward until we have a licensed manager. It just hasn't been a priority.
Well, and then in terms of your economic buyer too, for those on the call who may have different services that involve, like, say, different departments, heads of, maybe they have a different version of the software that is more of a marketing tool versus a sales tool, right? So being able to come in there and say, hey, who in your marketing department might be interested in trying out our marketing version of this tool, this whatever the tool is. So being able to make sure you identify that, have those close conversations. Because I think the worst thing is when you don't hear anything from them and then you get surprised. Because like I've gone dark personally on software that I've used because we're not using it, and I've already in my mind said we're moving off of that, and I haven't engaged with the rep, and they haven't reached out to me either. And little do they know, I've already taken it off the budget and things like that, because the value hasn't, they haven't been coming to me with the value, and I didn't really see it, or maybe it was on us, maybe we didn't do a good job of rolling it out or what, but. So I think that communication is really important, like you said, about the economic buyer and making sure that you're really appealing to them. Trey, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I think that's back to Tammy's point. I think that's where like a quarterly business review or a quarterly success plan or some regular check-in with the client is so important because it can give you kind of a forewarning on churn, and churn's a reality right now, right? I mean, customers are constantly reevaluating their budgets in the economic climate. So yeah, I would strongly encourage some kind of regular check-in, both with your technical champions, the people that are running the product, and then also your economic buyers. And if you can have some way to reflect back to the economic buyer the value that you're delivering over the course of the contract, ROIs aren't for the sale. They are used in the sale, but they're really more for what's the realized value of the software over the life of the contract. And it's funny, we have a big brief executive business value thing that we put together at the end of our sales process that includes pricing and an ROI and all that. But it's so important to have that continuity both with the rep, but also with those with that value, so that we're constantly coming back to it to make sure it's realized and we're not surprised at the end of a contract when the economic buyer, we may have a user that's getting value, but the economic buyer is not, hey, I thought I'd be seeing more of this data in my life, those kinds of things.
Well, thanks. I mean, this has been great, guys. I wanted to wrap up here with some key takeaways and insights from all of your expertise during this discussion. So, Tammy, you want to kick us off?
Ooh, key takeaways. I think that pricing is very customized depending upon so many things, your market, how sticky your product is, your AEs. I think training is really important. Love some of Trey's suggestion on making sure that the comp plan aligns with whatever goals you have as a company. Like, don't leave the AE out because they're very coin operated. So those were kind of my key takeaways.
Love it. I love it. Trey, what about you? What are your words of wisdom to leave the team with?
Yeah, I think back to what I was kind of harkening back to what I was saying earlier. In pricing and negotiation, in value, there's an exchange of value, right? We're going to receive monetary value and we're going to deliver value back that usually needs to be measured in some kind of monetary value way. But if we can be fluid enough, flexible enough to create win-win-win scenarios with our client, the rep wins, the company wins, the customer wins, we enter into the partnership, not just a single transaction, but a full true relationship between two companies that has enough energy in it to get us to the renewal, to get us to a 5-year lifetime value that we're building into our valuation models that we're all at startups trying to drive. Right. As we see churn, we're going to impact our models. All of our shares that we own at startups are going to become worth less money. Right. And, worst case scenarios, we have to take down rounds and all that kind of stuff. So as a rep, if you're a rep, be thinking about that. If you're a leader, think about that. If you're a customer and a buyer, think about that. How do we create win-win-win scenarios? How do we co-create solutions together so that there's enough energy in the contract to truly see the value that's exchanged in the software?
Great. That was great, Trey. Thank you. Go ahead, Sarika.
I love the win-win-win. I think it's sort of like the bottom line of negotiation. Like, negotiation is about all parties winning. So totally get that and value it. I think I just want to say, I've seen this again and again. If you look at the best companies in the world, they don't just innovate on the product. They actually innovate on the pricing models. And it's an opportunity for every revenue leader to think about that and think about how can they build in price structures that maximizes revenue and align that to value. I think a lot about how do we meet our customers where they are and build a price structure that fits them and us, which is kind of the win-win part, but really with the right processes and tools that can create transparency from the beginning to that continued relationship. So I think of these relationships as long-term relationships that we build with them. And how can you start with trust? So they know exactly why they're paying what they're paying, but then as they get more value, you can actually charge for it. And if you can achieve that, I think you will end up building a really, really big company, right? Because now you actually have partners who are building it with you, building the company with you, right? So I think a lot about that, and to me, that would be something that I'd love the audience to think about, right? Yeah.
Definitely needs to be a partnership. Well, thank you guys. I'm going to turn it back over to Angelica.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Sandy, Sarika, Tammy, and Trey for your awesome insights today. That was such a great discussion. And thank you, everyone, for attending this amazing discussion today at MSP. Just a quick reminder that the recording, key takeaways, along with the recording will be made available on the MSP website before the end of day. So stay tuned for that. And we will see you at the next event. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.
All right.
Thank you
Bye.
so much.
Bye.
Thank you all.